Howdy, howdy, and welcome to yet another Workshop Wednesday. This time it's what's new updates and features released in July of 2019. My name is Chris Mercer. I do go by Mercer, and I'm the co-founder here at measurementmarketing.io, and you can find our content featured on such platforms as Digital Marketer, Conversion Excel, Social Media Examiner, and of course, all of the different courses and trainings that we offer at measurementmarketing.io. Our whole purpose here is to help marketers, marketing teams, and agencies understand how to know their numbers, and we do that by helping them learn how to use tools like Tag Manager, Google Analytics, Google Data Studio, and plenty of others like the new kids on the block, like Facebook Analytics. And we do that with the Measurement Marketing Framework as well. The framework really is 5 steps. It's planning, figuring out what's important to measure and why and what you're going to do with it. Then it's building, which is actually using tools like Analytics and Tag Manager. And of course, then there's the reports that you would go into to find the answers that you need, ultimately, so that you can start marketing forward and forecast your results and then optimize against what your forecasts were. So that is the Measurement Marketing Framework in a nutshell. Now, with all these trainings, specifically today, one idea is what you're really looking for, one new concept. Now, this one's actually kind of easy, I think, in this particular workshop, because this is a What's New workshop, and we do these once a month, and we just sort of recap the last 30 days worth of changes. There were big changes, big changes. So I'm really excited for this one. And this is one of those things that we'll talk about now and again and again and again as time goes forward. So let's go ahead and jump right into it, shall we? What's new? New updates and features released in July 2019. So we're going to jump right in, as we often do, just to kind of recap. I'm going to start with the one that gets updated the most, which is Data Studio. Data Studio had a couple of updates that were kind of nifty. One of them was tree maps. So this is a new chart type that exists called a tree map. It's right down here. Pretty easy to use. Just sort of connect the dots. And what it does is exactly this. Those of you that are familiar with Google Analytics have probably already seen this inside Google Analytics. That's also a report that's available to you. But it visually breaks down what essentially would just be a table would be just the numbers. And the tree map shows you like visual blocks. So you can kind of see how things relate to each other. So that's really all it is. And of course, you can change the colors and design and style and everything else that you want to do, just like you're familiar with already with a lot of the tables. So just know that they have options back there for that. Also, as an additional things that you can do with Data Studio in tables, speaking of, you can now compare to max. So this is another recent update that came out just a couple of weeks ago, actually. And this is where in a table, you can now say, okay, I want to see the percent max. So out of all the, in this case, Pretty Bird seed, what was the maximum value? And then what was the percentage of maximum, difference from maximum, etc. So play with that if that answers some questions or help you get to some information that you need a little bit easier. That might be something useful for you as well. And other than that, I mean, tree maps were the biggest sort of visual thing because it's a whole new chart type. Other than that, not much else was available back there with Data Studio that I saw was a super cool big giant change. But that moves in the Tag Manager. And Tag Manager did have some changes. You might already have these, or if you don't, you will over the next few weeks. As you come into tags, you may have noticed, I'm going to go to new tag here. You may have noticed there are new tags available to you. So you have the good old-fashioned Google Analytics, Universal Analytics that we all know and love. Now you also see app plus web configuration and app plus web event. So these are new Google Analytics built-in tags. They are made for basically tracking Firebase projects. Those of you who maybe have done mobile app tracking already might already be using Firebase, probably are. But this is just something to let you aware, like, hey, this now exists. But the reason that this exists is the biggest change of this past month, the biggest update, I should say, of this past month. And that ties us into Google Analytics, because that's really where these matter, this whole concept. Like, why do these tags even exist? So that brings us to this, Google Analytics. And this is off just the blog.google. You will be able to go there and you'll see this. This is, I think, going to be really, really big. So what they're doing is they have created essentially what I think, just from the underpinnings of it, seems like a completely different analytics that they're building. So I'm going to click in where it says read article here and just kind of show you what this is. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see some of these things here. So as I scroll through this, now we don't have access to all this because we're not doing a lot of Firebase yet. This is more, again, this is just a features and update, kind of a what's new workshop. So I wanted you to be aware of this. And I think at this point, honestly, that's it. For now, just be aware of it. Maybe play around with this a little bit if it suits your use case. I personally am going to be watching this one like a hawk. because I think this is going to solve a ton of problems. It gives Google the chance, as I zoom in here to let you see this. Let me see if I can't quite get this image big enough, but that's okay. Let's go to copy image address. Do it the old-fashioned way. So if you look at this image here, this is under creating an account. This is not in our section yet, so we don't have this set up yet for us, but eventually we will over the next few weeks, and you will as well. At least that's the goal. So if you'll notice here under create account, it's a different style, and they've got the web interface and you have your apps interface. And these are the same that we've always kind of, stuff you already know and love. This is new, apps and web. So here's the concept. The concept is in the back in the day, you had only web pages. Then you had apps. So apps came out, but apps were measured completely differently. And they were done through SDKs and then eventually through Firebase, something called Firebase. So essentially, it's still siloed, though. Apps were measured one way, web was measured another way, and it was very difficult to see crisscross between them. Enter apps and web. So what's happening here is I think this solves a lot of problems for Google Analytics and is really exciting to see what happens just in the world of measurement over the course of this next year. Obviously, this is just brand new for everybody, right? It's beta, so keep an eye on it. But essentially what they're doing is they're saying, okay, we're going to create yet a third version, which is you can do both. You can measure the web and you can measure apps, and you can do it in the same bucket, right? We can do it in the same account, the same property. So now you have both of these different things combined, which means you have to measure completely differently because everything's, for those of you that are familiar with Kissmetrics, it kind of works, I think, like that is the best analog. So Kissmetrics, you have to push in every single event, kind of like Facebook. With Facebook Analytics or Facebook Pixels, you push in every single event that you want Facebook to remember. And it's kind of the same thing with this. You just push in every single event. So it's not going to remember a page view unless you tell it to remember a page view. It's not going to remember scroll unless you tell it to remember scroll. But speaking of, as I scroll through here, and again, we'll put links in this for the members area. You can just Google it, of course. But what we see here is a whole new analytics that's coming with this property. And this is what I think is really interesting about it, because the fact that they've created this as an option seems to basically given them the ability, the opportunity to do what many of us have basically wanted them to do for a long, long time, which is like, hey, now that you know what you know about the internet and about the web and about users, can we stop using technology that's 15 years old and instead rebuild analytics in the way that you know it could be tracking now? Like use the power of Google and all the smarts and information, everything else that you have as a resource and like rebuild it. And I think this is the way that they can do that. Like that's essentially what I think can do. This is like, we've talked about this before with multi-channel funnels within the old Google Analytics, where it's kind of like, oh, it's kind of like its own little, a totally different way of, it's a different API. It's a different analytics. This is quite literally a different analytics. It records differently. It has different definitions for everything. The reports are different. It is 2.0, right? Essentially, this is like Google Analytics 2.0. So it's a much bigger upgrade to the point of where it's basically a replacement. And I can see kind of long term how this could be that. Now, I in the short term, don't panic. The old Google Analytics, Universal Analytics is not going away. There's millions, tens of millions of people, of sites that use analytics. It's not going away anytime soon. But I can see this thing being super interesting. Like this is just the, let's turn on the switch and let the market see what we've been doing in the background kind of stage, right? This is the beta early bird stage. But man, this seems like this is, if I'm excited as a user, right? as a somebody who's in measurement and trying to measure marketing, because I can now have the opportunity to measure all sorts of customizations and different things, and maybe they start tracking users a little differently, or it gives them the ability to get past like the cookie issue that people are running into. And again, I don't know that for a fact, but if I'm Google, I've thought about that at least, right? I'm sure that I'm positive they have, all right? It's a big challenge. And so how do you track devices? How do you track user types? Like they basically have gotten to rebuild this thing in that way. At least they have the opportunity to. And so my guess is some of that, if not all of this, is coming from that, which is, I think, really cool. Again, pure theory on my part. I have no connections with Google at all. I have no idea. I'm just kind of looking at the pattern going, that's really interesting. So this whole new interface is coming out with this particular thing. And check this out. This is something where now you can do this enhanced measurement which is really smart because this shows the same pattern we've seen over and over and over again with tools like Tag Manager, where before, if you wanted to track a video or scroll, you had to do it with a big long script and sort of custom code something. Then eventually you could copy somebody's custom coded stuff. Then eventually Tag Manager said, hey, we'll just make it built in, use a trigger. Well, now it's bypassing even that, and it's going right into the platform itself of analytics. And you're saying Google Analytics, hey, capture scroll. Google Analytics, hey, capture outbound links. Google Analytics, hey, capture my YouTube videos. And it just turns it on, and then automatically starts doing it. Now, again, I don't know how this works. We haven't played with this yet, so I have zero experience with this. But the idea is intriguing. The concept of this is intriguing because now you're just turning on features of Google Analytics so that it can start tracking certain events. Whereas before you had to sort of force feed it that stuff and set everything up in Tag Manager and all of that. Now, does it mean that Tag Manager is gone, doesn't have a place? Of course not, because Tag Manager can be in charge of all of your platforms, right? So I'm personally still going to set up scroll through Tag Manager because it can tell Facebook at the same time it's telling Google Analytics, right? And that's how we're using Tag Manager. I suggest you do as well. But if you're just using GA, I think this is super cool. And the fact that they can do this. And I also think, like, what else might they come out with, right? What else other, now that they have this, they even the possibility now of turning on features in GA to track. And that what else might they come up with? Like, I think that's really, really intriguing. So file downloads, super cool, right? So again, if you're using Tag Manager already, this doesn't change anything. You can still use Tag Manager. You can still, in fact, see the tags in Tag Manager, right? We showed you that initially before we jumped into this sort of the deep end here. But this is exciting. Like, if you're at all involved in measurement, and I know you are, because why would you have made it this far in this video if you weren't? This is exciting because it is, I think, Google's Etch-a-Sketch moment, where they can sort of say, like, hey, we love Analytics Classic, and they did what they can to kind of remake it when they did Universal Analytics, and they redid a lot of the base code and everything else, but they still sort of had this constraint that they had to deal with. This is a whole other account type. Therefore, it can be this Etch-a-Sketch moment where they can just sort of say, cool, let's just start over with a blank slate, right? So to Etch-a-Sketch, shake the Etch-a-Sketch, and rebuild analytics as we think it should be rebuilt. And knowing what we know, how it could be rebuilt, and knowing what we know, what people are tracking, things like scroll, things like video, right? Which otherwise you had to do through Tag Manager. Now Analytics can do it on its own. Like, that's super cool. Also, because you're doing all of this, you've got this analysis tool that's coming in. Because all of this information's coming in, you've got different ways you can analyze stuff that's back here. And I don't think this replaces Data Studio, but it does make it a little easier maybe to get answers in the back of Google Analytics. And I think, initially this might look really complicated. We'll play around with it. But this is my favorite part right here. New funnels coming through. Right? So now this works, and this was for the past, 2 years now, we've been saying Facebook Analytics has really, really beat Google Analytics when it comes to funnels. I don't know that's going to be the case after this officially rolls out and we start seeing how this works, because I'm pretty sure this would end up basically beating Facebook Analytics. It takes back the reign, because if you can really create any funnel you want, and you can do it in events, you see that down here, they've got these little events here. So if you can do it through events so now everything's an event, just like Facebook. So now it's not, a page view and then I can't track the button click. It's like, no, I want to do a page view. Then they clicked on a button. Then they watched the video 25% of the way. Then they bought. Everything's just an event now. So you can track these funnels. And so if we can do that, and if these funnels retro, which again, I don't know because we haven't played with this, we're just sort of dealing with what we've got on this blog post, which was just recently released, like in last week or so. This shows that there's some massive potential, which is what I really, really like about this. Because now if everything's an event, it doesn't matter if it's coming in from an app, it doesn't matter if it's coming in from the website. It basically is working exactly like Facebook Analytics works, right? And so now they can track users in a different way because they've got that ability to sort of have this open book. And if everything's an event, you can build funnels based on events and sequences and segments and everything else that comes along with it. And again, everything that's in Universal Analytics is not going to come over into this new account version immediately. Some of it will, but a lot of it's not. But eventually, right? This is just the first, like, hey, let's turn on the switch. And so, man, go Team Google. This is incredible, I think. So because again, this is the opportunity to look through and say, like, okay, here's what's going on. Here's how I can find answers faster. I can get the information that I need so I can take the actions I decide I needed to take before I jumped into this whole thing, right? So across platforms, across devices, user counts. I think there's speaking of useful truth, right? We always talk about that a lot here at measurementmarketing.io, that the point of Google Analytics is to give you a useful truth. I think it gets more useful in this method. So here's my personal plan. And again, I don't know that this is what you should do. My personal plan is I'm keeping an eye on this. I will practice it. I'm sure we're going to have workshops on it as we kind of get experience with it on our end. We don't have an app, but I don't care. Like for me, I'm going to use it to track the website as kind of in parallel. I'm not going to get rid of my initial web. I'm going to come back to this one because it's bigger. I'm not going to get rid of my initial web one. That's going to stay up and running. Tag Manager points to that. I'm not changing anything there, but I will create another one of these just to practice, and I'm going to track my own website. Again, I don't care if I don't have an app, because I want to see how it tracks differently. And does it give me a different user account? What features can I take advantage of back here? Which I think there could be more than one that would be really, really interesting to play with. So that's kind of what we're gonna tiptoe into this. We're not gonna use it in any sort of like real production, way. We're still getting all of our answers from our original one here. But man, I think a year from now, when this is cooked and everyone's got a ton of experience and we're starting to see a lot of stuff come through here, I can see this being, maybe we start switching over our Data Studio reports to pulling in from whatever is in here. Like, it could be really interesting. So we'll see. Again, there's really, where this goes, who knows? I just think the potential is incredible. I'm super excited. Again, hats off to Team Google for really cracking this out, because this clearly shows they have heard everybody who's been talking about like, oh, cookies are a problem, and Safari is changing cookies, and Firefox is going to start blocking cookies, and oh my gosh, and all this other stuff that goes on. And again, I'm positive cookies are still involved here, but who knows in the future? Like, they got a chance to rebuild it from the ground up. Maybe they've thought about that too. They probably have. They are some smart individuals over there. And they are dedicated to making this tool better and easier to use, and able to give us as marketers, as people who are in measurement, able to give us answers so we can take action, right? And so this is a huge, huge change. And again, I think for now, the action step is just be aware. At this point, I don't think you need to go off and do anything. If you wanted to play around with this, feel free. Like I said, we're going to have additional workshops on this, I'm sure. So we'll have workshops on it. Eventually, as we get more and more experience with it and it starts opening up a little bit more and we start really coming up with some good use cases, I'm sure we'll produce a win course around it at a certain point in time. But for now, it's going to be, hey, we're going to watch this. We're going to let it roll out to the different accounts. We're going to practice some stuff, because this gives us an opportunity to learn a whole other way of measuring, which could be a lot more useful and help us future-proof, which is pretty exciting. So as soon as we get something that's a little easier, we can make it more accessible for you, then we definitely will. Like, that's what we are here for. But otherwise, if you feel like you're an early adopter and want to tackle it from a tech perspective, go for it. I think this is a really, 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 really useful feature. So with that, what was your one thing? I know for me, hands down, it's Google Analytics 2.0. Like, and that's what I'm going to call it. I don't know if it really is that officially, but mentally, kind of as a shortcut in my head, that's what I think this is. It's a different, instead of classic to universal, it's like Google Analytics Classic and Google Analytics Universal. It is now like, no, this is a whole new thing. It's 2.0, big giant change, big giant version, very similar to WordPress when they went to Gutenberg. Like, the editor completely changed in 5.0 of WordPress, right? A completely different thing. And they rebuilt the brain, right, of their editor in WordPress. It's kind of the same thing I think that's going on with analytics right now. And this is huge. Like, I love this sort of movement, these big, gigantic, massive changes that say, hey, we've been hearing what you're saying. We know that there's challenges out there. Here's some ways that we think we're going to be able to handle that and play with this. Well, in the meantime, they're in the background doing even more. Like, I would love to see what's really kind of going on under the scenes in their side of things. It's probably incredible. So anyway, be aware of that. And again, for me, that was my one thing, just being aware that it was a thing. I'm going to keep an eye on it. I'm not going to freak out about the old one going away, because there is zero concern I have of that. It's just way too embedded, and that's not going to happen. So I think Universal is going to be around for a long, long time. But this is really interesting, and we are going to look toward how to use it and how to get a little more useful measurements out of it. So, of course, we'll communicate that here for you as well. Now, speaking of different things like Win courses, if you are not yet a part of any of these and you're interested in kind of learning some measurement skills, measure.tips/courses will take you to all of our different Win courses. Win Monthly Pass is an option if you want to get them all and have access to everything. You can do that as well. And then, of course, we have the Academy. So if you have a team, if you're a larger company, you have multiple people that you want to get trained up, we've got Measurement Marketing Academy, measure.tips/start to help you out with that. As an Academy member, you also, every Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, you have access to the Academy members' office hours member Q&A. It's kind of like group coaching, basically is group coaching, but it's a small group because not everybody's going to join up for that. So if you have questions, you want to talk it out with an instructor, you can get in there, click on a link. You've already got your links for this week, those of you who are Academy members, and thank you again for being an Academy member. But those members can click on the link and then join the calls and chat with an instructor live. You can share your screens, walk through issues, and everybody can kind of learn and chat together, including maybe even talking about this new feature that's coming out for GA, because I think that's really, really cool. All right. Speaking of workshops, next week's topic, we rotate topics every single week. Next week's rotates back to getting started, which is for our beginners. So if you're just getting started, we're going to talk about, in this case, our beginner topic is tracking your traffic using UTMs with Google Analytics. And it's not just what UTMs are. So for those of you who might be familiar with those, but if not, you'll obviously get familiar with those. But we're also going to talk about the structure of UTMs. And I think that's really the secret sauce when it comes to this. And that's where people mess it up. The first step is realizing you can track your traffic and use UTMs, and that they're even a thing. But very quickly, people use those in the wrong way, and it fractures traffic anyway, and it makes it a lot harder to read the story in Google Analytics. But if you structure it properly, the story's easier to read. So that's what we're going to talk about next week on Workshop Wednesday. Now, if you are not yet a part of Workshop Wednesday, please do join it. It is free. Measure.tips/WW will take you there so you can be a part of this. You get notified of each workshop. You get access to each workshop for the week that it's available. But not all workshops are publicly available. So if you happen to see this one because we made it public, that's awesome and welcome. And I love that you're here and hopefully it was useful. But you do not get access to every single workshop unless you're on the list. So it is free to join, at least currently. So take advantage of that now if this at all interests you. Measure.tips/WW. And with that, we will go ahead and bring it to a close. You've just watched What's New? New updates and features released in July of 2019. Thanks again for watching this workshop, and we will see you on the next. Take care.